Good evening. The date is February 19th, 2026. You are listening to a special transmission of The Deep Dive.
Tonight, we are suspending our standard programming for what is essentially a command briefing on the security situation in East Asia.
We'll be focusing our lens on the maritime periphery of China. It's a region where the geopolitical barometer has, well, it's fallen quite sharply over the last 2 weeks.
Indeed, we're seeing a convergence of military maneuvers, diplomatic signaling, and digital warfare that really suggests the Pacific theater has moved from simple tension into a new, more volatile phase.
Before we open the dossier on these events, we must acknowledge our partner, ProWave AI.
And of course, this deep dive you're listening to is generated by Stylo News, the AI-powered intelligence application.
It's important to clarify for you what this tool is. Stylo News isn't just another news app.
No, not at all. It's the consumer-facing version of the Stylo Intel Ops software. We are talking about the exact same architecture used for enterprise operations in, government, military, and high-level business.
Precisely. So by listening to this, you are effectively using the same grade of situational awareness tools that decision makers in the Pentagon, or the Diet in Tokyo, or even the Politburo are using to cut through the noise.
And there is a tremendous amount of noise right now.
There is. The subject of tonight's briefing is gray zone wars, China's expanding maritime strategy.
Our mission is to dissect the events of the last 2 weeks, identify the operational patterns, and understand the strategic thinking from Beijing to Manila to Washington.
We'll strip away the rhetoric and look strictly at the facts on the ground. This is about informing, not alarming.
Let's begin with the map. The South China Sea, specifically the coordinates around Huangyuandao. You might know it internationally as Scarborough Shoal.
This has been the kinetic flashpoint over the last few weeks. The timeline here is absolutely critical to understanding the escalation.
It is. The friction point really started when the Philippines declared a military exercise zone that directly overlaps with this disputed feature.
And that zone became effective when?
January 21st. And it's scheduled to run right through to March 31st. Manila is essentially asserting its claim through presence.
And Beijing's countermove was, well, it was immediate. And frankly, unprecedented in its composition.
Right. The People's Liberation Army Southern Theater Command launched what they designated as Armed Combat Readiness Patrols. That was on January 31st.
But let's look closer at the hardware they use, because that tells the real story. We're not discussing water cannons this time.
No. The escalation ladder has been climbed significantly. The PLA deployed H-6K bombers.
And for those in our audience who might not track military aviation, the H-6K is a strategic asset.
It's a nuclear-capable bomber designed for long-range strikes. And in this patrol, intelligence sources say they were armed with YJ-12 anti-ship cruise missiles.
The YJ-12 is a supersonic missile, is it not?
It is. It's designed as a carrier killer. Flying a formation like that over a disputed shoal is a massive deviation from the usual script.
Usually these disputes are handled by Coast Guard vessels. White hulls, non-lethal deterrence.
Exactly. That's law enforcement posturing. Bringing in H-6K bombers is a threat of high-intensity warfare. It changes the calculus completely.
So from Beijing's perspective, the Philippine exercise zone is illegal, a violation of their sovereignty.
And by deploying this kind of hardware, they're signaling they can enforce that sovereignty, not just protest it.
And the Philippines, of course, views this as a direct infringement on their maritime rights and active intimidation.
Which brings us to the central theme of the reports we're analyzing, the gray zone strategy.
It's a term we hear a lot in defense circles. It's the operational space between peace and total war.
Correct. The objective is to alter the status quo without crossing the specific line that triggers a full-scale military response from, say, the United States.
You use a mix of military power, like those bombers, combined with Coast Guard vessels, and of course the maritime militia.
The maritime militia being, in effect, a paramilitary force using commercial fishing vessels.
And that's the salami slicing aspect of the strategy.
It is. A single fishing boat doesn't justify a military response, but 1,000 of them can effectively blockade an island. It forces your opponent into a bind. Do you escalate and risk a major war, or do you back down?
There's a new domain entering this gray zone now, too. I'm looking at intelligence on President Xi Jinping's recent directives. There's a digital component.
This is a development that arguably outweighs the bomber patrols in the long term. President Xi has now publicly confirmed the deployment of a PLA cyberspace force.
And they're stationed at Fiery Cross Reef in the Spratlys,
Which is one of those major artificial islands, essentially a stationary aircraft carrier. And now it's also a server farm and an electronic warfare hub.
So the dispute is no longer just about who has more steel in the water.
Precisely. It shifts the front line to the electromagnetic spectrum. If you can jam the communications of a Philippine resupply ship or hack a drone's navigation, you can deny access without firing a shot.
A soft kill capability, deployed right at the tactical edge.
So we have nuclear-capable bombers in the air, cyber units on the reefs. Let's shift our focus north now, to the Taiwan Strait. If the South China Sea is about jurisdiction, Taiwan is about existential sovereignty.
And the data from mid-February is just staggering.
It's a saturation strategy. On February 15th alone, Taiwan detected 11 Chinese aircraft and 8 naval vessels operating nearby.
But the daily numbers almost become background noise unless you look at the trend line.
That's right. The sources are highlighting a 15-fold surge in these incursions over the last 5 years. That's not an uptick. It's a fundamental change in the operational borderline.
It creates a new normal.
Yes. We're seeing specific aggressive tactics, aircraft crossing the median line of the strait.
Which used to be a tacitly understood boundary that neither side crossed.
For decades. Now we're seeing flares fired near Taiwanese jets. It's a war of attrition fought in peacetime.
And it puts an immense strain on Taiwan's Air Force. They have to scramble for every single event.
Exactly. But there's a huge new variable in this equation, and it comes from Washington.
The 2026 U.S. National Defense Strategy has just been released. And the silence in that document, it's deafening.
It is. Analysts in Taipei are poring over every word, and what they're not finding is causing significant anxiety. The strategy omits direct, ironclad references to the defense of Taiwan.
How do we interpret that? Is that an oversight or a deliberate doctrinal shift?
In a document of this importance, there are no accidents. Sources analyzing the Trump administration's foreign policy describe it as transactional.
Meaning allies must take primary responsibility for their own defense.
Yes, it suggests that American support is conditional. So President Lai Ching-te in Taipei reads this and realizes the security umbrella might be, well, leaking.
Alarm bells must be ringing.
An understatement. He's pushing for a defense budget of 1.25 trillion new Taiwan dollars. He's trying to prove to Washington that Taiwan is a paying customer, not a charity case. But he's facing stiff internal opposition.
The Independent and Taipei Times seem to frame this U.S. shift as pragmatic, but also destabilizing.
That is the danger. Ambiguity can be a tool of deterrence, but if Beijing interprets transactional as disinterested, they may calculate that the cost of an invasion has just dropped. Miscalculation is the mother of all catastrophe in this region.
Speaking of the U.S. posture, let's pivot back to the Philippines. While the language on Taiwan might be ambiguous, the physical footprint in Luzon is becoming very concrete.
It is. This is the Philippine pivot in action. The U.S. Army has established a rotational presence on Luzon Island, which faces Taiwan, and they're supporting the Typhoon missile system there.
The Typhoon system is significant. It gives them a mid-range capability that can reach both the Taiwan Strait and the South China Sea from Philippine soil.
Which certainly keeps Chinese military planners up at night. This is all happening around the 80th anniversary of U.S.-Philippine diplomatic ties, which they marked with joint bomber patrols over the Luzon Strait.
So we have U.S. bombers and Chinese bombers patrolling the same choke points. But the view from Manila isn't entirely unified, is it?
No, it's a fascinating internal contradiction. On one hand, you have the security establishment, the Coast Guard, running what they call a transparency initiative.
This is their strategy of publicizing every Chinese incursion, right?
Yep.
Releasing footage of water cannons, lasers.
Exactly. They are trying to win the information more, to rally international sympathy. But on the other hand, the foreign ministry seems to be reading from a different script.
The diplomats are worried about the economic fallout.
They're terrified. China is a massive trading partner. So while the Coast Guard is shouting from the rooftops, the foreign ministry is calling for de-escalation.
And caught in the middle of this are the local fishermen.
Always. This is where geopolitics becomes personal. When Chinese vessels engage in these tactics, the local fishermen can't work. The local economy takes a direct hit.
I want to look inside Beijing now. We've talked about their external projection of power, but the sources indicate there's significant turbulence within the PLA itself.
It's the paradox of these systems. External aggression can often mask internal insecurity. President Xi Jinping has been conducting a series of high-level purges of top military generals.
The official charges are always corruption and disloyalty.
Disloyalty is a very broad term in that context. And yes, it absolutely impacts their warfighting capability. It can create a paralysis of command.
And there are other issues, too. I'm seeing a report on the PLA Navy's operational challenges. specifically with recovering aircraft underwater.
That's right. It sounds technical, but it's critical. Carrier operations are dangerous. Planes crash. When a jet goes into the water, you need to get it back immediately.
To find out what went wrong and to prevent your technology from falling into enemy hands.
Precisely. If an American submarine gets to that wreckage first, it's an intelligence goldmine. The report suggests the PLA lacks the reliable deep-sea recovery infrastructure to do this effectively.
It's a reminder that commissioning a new aircraft carrier is one thing. Mastering the complex ballet of carrier operations is another thing entirely.
So the purges and these technical struggles, they suggest Xi is trying to force march the military into readiness. Some sources still point to 2027 as a key date.
The centennial of the PLA. He wants the option to take Taiwan by force by then.
And he's purging the ranks now to ensure that when or if he gives that order, the commanders are loyal to him personally.
Let's widen the lens to the neighbors. ASEAN seems to be in an impossible position.
ASEAN is built on consensus, which doesn't work well when great powers start maneuvering. Malaysia was the chair in 2025, and they prioritized restraint. Now the Philippines is the chair for 2026.
Which is incredibly awkward given they're the ones currently locking horns with China.
It's a diplomatic nightmare. They're trying to finalize a code of conduct for the South China Sea while simultaneously being the primary target of this gray zone pressure.
And the social media sentiment in the region.
It's neutral to cautious, but the underlying emotion is fear. The people of Southeast Asia don't want to be caught in the middle. They don't want to be forced to choose sides.
So, looking ahead, what should we be watching? There's a major diplomatic event on the horizon.
The Trump-Xi Summit, scheduled for April 2026.
How does a summit like that influence the military maneuvers we're seeing right now?
Well, there's often a rhythm to these things. You might see a spike in activity to establish leverage and then a calculated lull just before the meeting, a diplomatic gesture.
So we might see a temporary reduction in PLA activity leading up to April?
It's possible. But the structural tensions, the gray zone strategy, the U.S. missile deployments, those remain. A summit might lower the temperature for a week, but it doesn't solve the underlying problem.
There's also a wildcard factor mentioned in the briefing, the weather.
Yes, Typhoon Shuwangyang, a rare cold wave plus typhoon event. In the maritime domain, the environment always gets a vote.
Rough seas can degrade sensors, ground aircraft, make small boat operations impossible.
Exactly. It complicates the timeline for everyone. It introduces chaos into an already unstable system.
So, to synthesize all of this, we have this gray zone pressure from China. We have a more transactional U.S. posture. What's the emerging strategy for U.S. allies in the region?
The sources point to what they're calling a porcupine strategy. Since U.S. help might not be a guarantee, nations like Taiwan and the Philippines are trying to arm themselves to be indigestible, too prickly, too costly to attack.
And for China?
They will likely continue the pressure, manage their internal stability while keeping the external pressure high enough to assert claims, but low enough to avoid a war they might not be ready for yet.
The risk, of course, being that low enough is a very subjective measurement.
That is the nightmare scenario. With this much military hardware in close proximity in contested waters, one miscalculation, one bad maneuver can turn a gray zone conflict into a very black and white war.
It is a sobering reality. The margin for error is thinner than it has been in decades.
It's a complex puzzle, but the patterns are there if you have the right tools to see them.
And that brings us back to the engine behind this deep dive, Stylo News.
If you found this briefing useful, you should know that you can create your own. Stylo News is available as a mobile and computer app.
It allows you to customize personal intelligence style briefs, just like this one, pulling from hundreds of traditional news sources and X. You don't need a security clearance to be well-informed.
You just need the right software.
You can subscribe to Stylo News for on-demand AI-powered news at www.stylonews.com.
It truly is the most powerful way to stay ahead of the curve.
Thank you for listening to this special briefing. We appreciate you trusting us with your time and attention.
And if there are specific topics or regions you want us to cover, please request them. You can also follow Stylo News on your favorite social media platforms to keep the conversation going.
Until next time, stay curious and stay informed. Goodbye.
Goodbye.